Hello, Marines. This is Peter Stulting. This is Power Talk. Today we will be visiting with Lieutenant General Victor C. Krulak, United States Marine Corps retired. Brute Krulak was Commanding General, Fleet Marine Force Pacific from 1964 until 1968. He was a key figure in the development of the Marine Corps in the 20th century. Good evening, General. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Sir, there are a number of questions we have about Incheon, Seoul that I'd like to ask you about. First, how did General MacArthur's timetable to take Seoul truly affect Major General Smith's decisions as the 1st Marine Division commander?
I don't know, and I don't believe anybody else knows. Obviously, the decision by General MacArthur to go to Incheon and Seoul was governed largely by hydrography and by the climate and by the clock. The ability to get LSTs ashore took place only at about 5 p.m. on the 15th of September. And this governed MacArthur's choice of time, and it influenced General Smith tremendously because he had about 13 days to do 40 days of planning. And he had only a half of a division staff, the other half being either busy fighting in the 1st Brigade or providing support in terms of a small group at MacArthur's headquarters.
Focusing on Posung Myong, or Anjung as you call it, I noticed that Major General Smith felt that General Almond had dismissed any problems as purely mechanical, in other words, not understanding the business of amphibious warfare. Lieutenant General Shepard stated that MacArthur did not believe Seoul was defended, that the people would rise up and welcome us, which obviously was very optimistic. And Rear Admiral Doyle felt that navigation, tides, hydrography, and landing in a large city which might be burning were all serious issues. And Admiral Forrest Sherman stated his support of this, but basically wimped out when confronted with MacArthur. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Yes, sir. Now, General J. Lawton Collins, in his book, as Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, of course, in this time, War and Peacetime, details his support for Posung Myong. And I am, myself, sir, am personally concerned about the near miss with Russian mines, because they were being rapidly organized very close to Seoul as we went in. And that really could... Yes, sir. And, sir, this might be a good time to tell our Marines where you were at that time in history, at that moment in history.
I was the G3 of FMF PAC, and at the time of Incheon, I was at Incheon. General Shepard was made the amphibious advisor, so-called, to General MacArthur. And General Shepard and I went with MacArthur during the immediate pre-landing period and during the landing at Incheon.
What was General Smith's relationship with General of the Army MacArthur and Major General Almond?
My views on it are only personal, and I don't know what his relationships were in a specific matter, but my exposure to General Smith during the immediate pre-planning phase, he was tremendously overburdened by minutia generated not so much by MacArthur himself, but by his staff and by General Almond, who was declared to be the prospective commander of the landing at Incheon. I would say that General Smith was heavily harassed by minutia, not consequentially, but it made his life much more difficult.
And I suppose this might be a symptom of the lack of understanding by General Almond and the 10th Corps Army staff of what amphibious operations entailed.
You've read First to Fight, Chapter 8.
Yes, sir.
And there are several classic examples of a lack of knowledge, and I will not go through them now because you can read the book anytime you wish. But there's no doubt that both MacArthur and General Almond, who was the titular commander of the 10th Corps, their feeling was largely mechanical. They did not see the realities of amphibious warfare as the Marines saw it, and they did not perceive many of the problems that we were forced to face.
Why did General Smith attack Seoul with the 5th Marines into the teeth of a 3-mile defense line? Did they not have a very good intel picture? What were the knowns at the time?
I don't know. General Smith made his tactical decisions based on his best judgment, and at the time, our purpose, as invariably is so, was to support him. Why he selected the scheme of maneuver which he did, I have no way of telling you, and I don't believe anybody else could either.
Why didn't General Smith send the 1st Marines to attack Seoul from the south in some sort of an envelopment rather than sending both the 5th and the 1st Marines into frontal attacks? And I suppose you might have a similar answer.
The same answer.
Yes, sir.
You must color what I've said by a realization that these Marine units, particularly the 5th and 7th, were tired. They had been involved in a very substantial operation. They had great trouble in freeing the 5th Marines from fighting with the Army
In the Pusan perimeter.
at Pusan. And this undoubtedly affected General Smith's tactical judgment, tactical decisions, although I never discussed this with him. The Marines' purpose in Incheon, Seoul, was to get the job done. And just exactly what the tactical decisions were or why, I can't tell you, and I don't believe anybody else can.
On a more personal note to Marines, why were the Marines not included in the formal ceremony to turn Seoul back over to Syngman Rhee?
I have no idea. I have no knowledge. And of course, some Marines' feelings were hurt. Mostly, they were concerned about the imposition of providing ceremonial troops when they were tired. But I don't know whether there was any specific reason for not including them.
General Krulak, I was struck reading your book, First to Fight, when you strongly suggested that Anjung, also known as Posung Myeong, 30 miles to the south of Incheon, would have been a more suitable place for cutting the North Korean supply lines stretching back from what's now North Korea to Pusan, and that the same effect would be attained without any of the dangers of hydrography, tides, and assaulting into a major city. And I'd like to focus on that because you're supported in your thinking, as expressed in your book, First to Fight, by General J. Lawton Collins, who was Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army during the entire Korean War, in his book, War and Peacetime. And there's a cast of characters here that I pulled out of your book, sir. To start with, Major General Smith, O.P. Smith, the division commander, felt that General Almond dismissed any problems of amphibious warfare as purely mechanical. Now, this is something you've already touched on, but I wanted to bring it back into focus in this lineup. Do you have any further thoughts on that?
There was substantial support for a landing in an area where hydrography did not dominate the whole scene. And Admiral Doyle, as an example, who was the Naval Attack Force commander, supported it wholeheartedly. And General Shepard and I thought that we had persuaded Admiral Sherman in a 3-person conversation or conference, and he, at least my recollection, and General Shepard's as well, was that he declared that he would attempt to persuade General MacArthur in a meeting which took place within 48 hours. He did not do so. I do not know why, and I don't believe anybody else does. But it was a grave blow because we believe we could have accomplished exactly the same things as a landing in a city at Incheon, that by landing in a far more fruitful and hospitable area.
Well, I noticed that from your book, Lieutenant General Shepard stated that MacArthur did not believe Seoul was defended and that the people would rise up and welcome us.
Yes, I heard him say that.
Which seems pretty simplistic on his part.
Well, do not get the idea that General MacArthur did not have a very acute strategic sense. He did. But his tactical sense was in doubt.
Now, Rear Admiral Doyle, as your book states, felt that navigation, tides, and hydrography were contrary landing in Incheon and landing in a large city, which might be burning, which is a very interesting point, because the North Koreans were ruthless and they might well have set it on fire.
No, what he was talking about was the pre-8-hour bombardment.
I see. That's very interesting. I stand corrected. Now, of course, we talked about Admiral Sherman. Let's say that the experts, the Marine Corps, were listened to. And maybe another thing, how about Lieutenant General Shepard being the amphibious commander?
The landing force commander.
Yes, sir, the landing force commander. Would that have been a real boon to the operation and perhaps pointed it towards Anjung, to Posung Myeong?
Who is to say? I believe that General Shepard was infinitely more competent as a landing force commander than General Edward Almond, who had no experience whatever and had a very profound conviction as to his own competence. I believe General Shepard would have done a far better job.
Do you feel that if we had gone into Anjung, to Posung Myung, that we would have had a better chance of cutting off the North Koreans before they could react, as they did to some degree in Seoul, because we could have gotten through the landing much quicker?
I don't know. My feeling is it would have been better.
Yes, sir.
But who knows?
We have a little time to discuss this here. MacArthur had the 1st Marines reshipped and sent around Korea to Wonsan. People have argued that it was a mistake. What are your views on that?
I believe that the redeployment probably was not wise, but I have no way of proving it.
How many times, sir, did you get to see General MacArthur?
I saw him a lot. Saw him every day. General Shepard and I joined his staff about 2.5 weeks before the 15 September landing at Incheon, and I saw him every day.
He had some very positive feelings towards Marines, didn't he?
Yes, I believe so. He spoke very warmly of his association with the 1st Marine Division in the Korean War.
Do you feel that Almond and others were much less appreciative of what the Marines were doing than MacArthur in that sense?
I never really made a warm or close association with General Almond, although I saw a lot of him. He, as you know, was Chief of Staff for General MacArthur, and concurrently was Commanding General of the 10th Corps, which was a real anomaly. He could issue himself orders.
That really does almost break the chain of command, doesn't it?
It does something wrong.
Yes, indeed. We have about 5 minutes left. What would you like to express yourself about? We've got 5 more minutes with the troops.
One thing that I never spoke to in Chapter 8 of First to Fight,
Yes, sir.
but which was implicit in almost everything I said, and it was the similarity of Marines, no matter whether they were in the Mediterranean or in Korea or anywhere, that the similarity of their training was a secret weapon. When the Marines came all the way from the Mediterranean to join in the Incheon landing, and did so on D-Day, they were able to integrate precisely into the 1st Marine Division's scheme of maneuver without any great problem. Now, this is a gem, a real jewel, and it's something that the Marines must never forget, the great virtue of uniformity in training.
Does this also touch upon, first, a rifleman in the training of a Marine?
Well, of course, they use the expression, I suppose they still can use it, every Marine a rifleman. What they mean is every Marine is competent with a rifle, but not every Marine is an infantryman. One of their secrets of success is that they all see it the same way, air, ground, the whole bunch.
It's a team, the Marine Air-Ground team.
Right.
Well, another thing I would like to have you reflect upon as a Marine is what your feelings are about the Corps and how you feel a sense of brotherhood, which I've certainly gotten that from your book, with other Marines.
There is a sense of one thing that pervades the Marine Corps top to bottom, and it is this: be ready to go with whatever you have.
Expeditionary.
Be ready to go with whatever you have.
You mentioned a marvelous sergeant, Gunnery Sergeant Walter Holdsworth.
Holdsworth, yes.
Yes, sir. That's something I think Marines would like to hear about.
Holdsworth ended up going down on the Arizona. He and I were both on the Arizona at the same time. And he was a hard-bitten, skilled, well-trained, poised Marine, unmarried, non-commissioned officer who had given his whole life and career to the Marine Corps. And he was ready to go with his bag packed all the time.
Incidentally, sir, when Arizona was attacked in Pearl Harbor, 7th December 1941, where were you on the ship and what happened to you?
I wasn't in the Arizona at that time. I had departed well before December 7th.
Well, it would seem from your book that Gunnery Sergeant Holdsworth was one of your key figures in your career as a Marine. He had a tremendous impact on you.
Yes, he did. He gave me some good advice. Among other things, he said, when I went to him and said, I'm not getting on too well with the Marine captain, who was the commander of the Marine Detachment of Arizona, and he said, it's real easy, Lieutenant. just find out what the old son of a bitch wants and give it to him.
Yes, sir. I read that in First to Fight. Of Marine officers, particularly general officers, who were the ones who inspired you the most that you had personal contact with?
General Shepard.
Lemuel C. Shepard, the commandant right after Korea, the one who was FMF PAC at Incheon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How long had you served off and on with General Shepard?
Oh, I've served with him about 4 times in various capacities. Finally, I worked for him when he was the commandant.
If you were to describe General Shepard's key strengths as a commandant, as an officer, what would you state?
Patient, strong, energetic, dependable.
And he loved his troops.
Yep.
He loved his Marines. Well, General Krulak, it's a privilege to talk to you, sir. And
send me a copy.
I certainly will, sir. You can count on it. Thank you, Lieutenant General Victor Krulak, Lieutenant General Brute Krulak, speaking to us about Incheon, Seoul, and about some thoughts about the Marine Corps. This is Peter Stulting. Thank you, Marines. Marines, I would like to draw your attention to General Krulak's book, First to Fight, An Inside View of the U.S. Marine Corps, originally published by the U.S. Naval Institute Press in 1984 in a hardcover edition, and it has been reprinted in a Blue Jacket Books printing, that is a paperback edition, by the U.S. Naval Institute, effective 1999 and in print today. And this is an excellent introduction to the Marine Corps for those who have not been Marines, and also, I think, a useful reminder to Marines of what Marines are all about. I would like to add here a passage from General Krulak's book, First to Fight. This is on page 138 and page 139, and I will now quote. A final pre-battle incident occurred early on the morning of D-Day. Mount McKinley had anchored near the transport area where an LSD of the attack force was to launch assault forces of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines in amphibian tractors, LVTs, for their attack on the offshore island of Walmi-do. Along with others, I was on the boat deck as the dawn broke, watching the air and naval gunfire preparation by planes of the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing and ships of the task force. As the first LVTs began to emerge from the mothership, I commented to General Amund, who was standing nearby. Quote, that LVT is certainly a versatile machine, unquote. Apparently not aware that I was referring to the ship-to-shore conveyance we were watching, he responded, quote, yes, tell me, can it float? Unquote. I was nonplussed. Here is the leader bearing the immediate responsibility for the entire landing force in a critical amphibious operation, and he wanted to know if an LVT would float. The Marines had been concerned about Amund during the planning phase, when he seemed to have his mind only on the big picture, the capture of Seoul, or, quote, making an anvil for the 8th Army's hammer, unquote. Yet the landing force, his landing force, was confronted with immense and immediate problems. A race with darkness, getting over mudflats, across seawalls, through a big oriental city, seizing an airfield, initiating a major logistics system, establishing a beachhead. These were the essential precursors of any hammer and anvil, and they were Amund's direct responsibility. It seemed from the first that he did not understand these things. That apprehension was now heightened in my mind as we stood there watching LVTs bearing the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, plow through the waves toward Walmi-do.